this had literature and countless gifts as well, and things that were made and things that are gone from this world.
Time. Damn. A follow-up question for you. Um, the British and the French, did they keep some of this stuff? Is it all destroyed? Is it in some museums?
They stole, especially the French. I have to say, a lot of the British get the entire rap for the Opium Wars, but the French were the ones who plundered this place the most. Well, all right. Welcome to Questioning History. We're a bunch of guys with none of the answers ask all of the questions, and we are
Hey.
joined here today by a very exciting guest from Cool History Bros. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Craig and Georgie.
Thanks for being here, man. It's always a pleasure to have people, especially from smaller channels, and especially covering topics that are more underrated. And I think East Asia is something that a lot of people want to get into, but never really do. I am kind of one of those people. Besides the Mongol stuff I've covered, I really don't know much. So today will be a very special episode where I'll be acting as a judge or referee, and we'll see our first duel between these two titans in this periods of history, and hopefully we have a lot of fun and learn a lot of things.
And maybe
And
we'll just
CJ,
Mhm.
would you like to explain a little bit what exactly your channel is? What do you cover? What you specialize in? How long you've been doing this?
Oh, well, I think I've been doing this around 2 years or a bit more. And the idea is that, I'm putting the story back into history, pretty much what I'm trying to do, because
Nice.
what happens in the West is that, a lot of the a lot of the history is told without much context. And, with
Hmm.
history, there is, from the people's side, there is all often literature and culture and theater, different arts are created in conjunction with the official history. So I'm just adding those back in, what the people, what the normal people actually feel and how they experience the history rather than what's officially written, or, at least what the elites consider to be important enough to be written. So I'm just adding a new dimension. And this is also the dimension that the people in these respective countries have experienced their history. That's how they experienced it. They experience it in the culture and the stories rather than what's just written in the official text. It is almost like bringing a bit of like how in the West, some people are really into the history of like Julius Caesar and just a small bubble of Roman history. But to Italians, to some of my Italian friends too, there is just a lot more history that is not mentioned, in
Hmm.
at least in the United States or in UK's media. So there is a
Yeah.
lot of story that's lost, and how they perceive the history and the context is quite different to what people in the West are used to.
Amazing.
Uh,
And we're gonna kick this right off. The time, the main and the counter time don't change. The only thing that changes the opponent and the judging. And our first debate is which state has inflicted the most damage on any given Chinese dynasty. You can only talk about the damage inflicted on a single Chinese dynasty, and you can pick any Chinese dynasty, and you can pick any state that inflicted massive damage to it. I'll give you both a little time to think, and Craig will start this off when he's ready.
I'll let him pick first because I
Okay.
don't want to be too stereotypical, being the Pacific War Channel, who I would probably pick, but there's
mm,
a few good answers to this, I'd say.
okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is a lot of good answers. Well, maybe I will just pick the one of the simpler ones. It's the Mongol state, I guess, the Yuan dynasty, another
Okay.
Chinese dynasty, did
Okay.
most harm because they pretty much
Save
conquered.
it. Save it. Save it
Yeah.
for the main.
All
Craig,
right,
what's your
cool.
choice?
I'm not gonna pick Japan. I'm gonna pick Britain.
Okay. Okay. Nice. The first and the second largest empires in human history. This will be interesting. Craig, whenever you're ready.
Oh, I'll start. All right. So I picked Britain because the Opium Wars were so devastating to China. You could basically say it kicked off the Century of Humiliation, and it brought down the Qing Dynasty eventually. China was at the pinnacle of its time in the 19th century. They had hoarded most of the world's silver, and Britain needed to get its tea fix. So the only way it could pay for the tea was with silver. Britain didn't have any silver, so they started smuggling opium. It destroyed not just the economy of China, it destroyed the very fabric of its society because so many people became addicted to the substance. They stopped working, they stopped performing as a military. And by the time the Second Opium War is going on, the degradation of their society allowed for the worst civil war to occur, the Taiping Rebellion. And the Taiping Rebellion killed almost like 20, maybe a possible 30 million people in China. And it just tore them apart. The Qing dynasty never came back after that. They were weakened. Everybody in China was dissatisfied with their government, and it wouldn't change until they eventually brought it down during the Xinhai Revolution of 1911. Basically, everything that was kicked off, it was because of Britain and the Opium War. And it was a minor incident when you think about it. Britain's war with China wasn't that big, and it wasn't that significant compared to China's inner turmoil going on. But just that little bit of encroachment was what really destroyed the Qing dynasty.
Nice, really good. By the way, my mistake. 90 seconds main argument, 60 seconds.
Okay, I was gonna say it was really long.
yeah. My bad. So you got a little extra time than we assumed. CJ, that was a hard main. You got to bring it in.
Okay. Right. The thing is, with what happened during the Mongol period, the Yuan dynasty, it's not just 100 years of humiliation. It's almost the destruction and the creation, separation of China itself. Because what happened was that they created different caste system and also divided Chinese people into Han and Southerners. So the idea of China as a unified state itself, the one ethnicity would have been divided into two forever. It could have split the idea of unified China, and I think the thing is, the idea is they did not implement much of the imperial examination and everything. They could have like destroyed the culture itself. China would not have existed at all if the Mongol really got through with everything. But of course, there are also internal instability within the Mongol court itself that prevented that. Which is quite interesting. But I would say, there is just a lot of potential for destruction by the Mongols. But it's just that the weaknesses of their own court, that's their own downfall.
Nice.
Okay. Right.
Okay, two really strong main arguments. Craig, how do you break the Mongols down and say that they didn't inflict as much damage as the British did?
It's a tough one. Ushering in the Yuan dynasty, the way the Mongols did, destroyed a lot of the fabric of China. And it established, like you said, the separation between the ethnic groups. Similar to what was going on, Britain had used that same ploy, trying to get the Han Chinese to overthrow their Manchu overlords. And they kept emphasizing the Manchu don't actually, they're a minority group. They're not the rightful rulers of China. Similar to how the Han probably saw the Mongol overlords at the time during the Yuan dynasty. But the Mongols remain a group within China, even during the Qing dynasty. They're part of the banner system. So they're kind of considered still part of China in some way, much as the same as the Manchu. So I don't think they necessarily destroyed China. And China's been destroyed countless times, and it's come back even stronger. And I think the fall of the Qing dynasty was much more devastating because it ushered in the modern China that we see today, and it was more corrupt.
Time.
Sorry, done.
Damn. Okay, time to bring it home, CJ.
That's hard.
Okay. I would say that as you have said, China has been destroyed and remade a lot of times, and the idea is that with what happened with the British did, they are actually also doing what the resistance in China itself is doing. It's there is a lot of the Fan Qing Fu Ming. It's to overthrow the Qing, the Manchus, and to to revive the Ming. And it's very interesting, the idea of Ming being revived instead of Han, because the idea that Ming itself, there is a lot of like unity between the different ethnic groups and also the Muslims and the Hui people and whatever. Some of the most ardent supporters are people from the outer regions, from the frontier regions of Ming. And the thing is, with the
And
Mongols,
time.
oh God.
Okay, that was an interesting one. I would have loved to hear more arguments of exactly what they destroyed, not just like the fragmentation of the state itself. Like, give me casualties, damages,
Summer
razed
Palace
city.
being burnt down, and then
Yeah,
the Mongols, they destroy a lot.
yeah. Both, or even like how did the Opium Wars affect the rebellions that came afterwards? I'm gonna give the first one to Craig for one specific reason. It was a narrow gap here. I'm giving it because CJ kind of undermined his own arguments by saying that the Mongols also fell apart, and
So did the Manchu.
yeah. And I think the counter of Craig was a little bit stronger. So the first point goes to Craig, but let's see how this goes on.
It's gonna take one middle-aged question. I'll be dead in the water. I'm so sorry to my audiences, but it's
pick
not
a dynasty. Any dynasty you want.
In China?
Yep.
Okay.
And
I mean,
then I'll reveal the second
Qing
part.
I would go with the Qing dynasty.
Okay.
Pick anyone. How about Tang Dynasty?
Qing and Tang. Okay. Craig is now the emperor of the Qing dynasty.
Oh God.
And CJ is the emperor of the Tang. And the question is, which one would be the hardest to rule successfully? You have to govern the entire dynasty. At which point, I'll leave that up to you. Maybe you can talk about in a broad sense.
We need to take the whole dynasty, right? I can't choose the beginning. Okay.
Yeah. Like as a whole, which one would be harder to rule more efficiently? Which is the harder job? CJ, you're gonna go first this time. So whenever you're ready, I got the clock.
Okay. All right, I would say it would be a lot harder to rule the Tang Dynasty because at the time, Tang Dynasty is known to be one of the most cosmopolitan empire in the world. People always think of Tang Dynasty as just a Chinese dynasty, but the thing is, the emperor Tang Taizong considered himself the Khan of heaven. So it means that he's also the ruler of the Turkic and the Uyghur people and the Mongol, or at least the Proto-Mongolic people. There are so many different people group, and the land is so vast. It's so difficult to rule, and that's why they just created a lot of these governor generals, which eventually led to the Anlusan's rebellion or Ansi's rebellion. What happened is just that there are just so many different people, different groups, and the communications logistic wasn't so great. So different groups created their own cliques, and they would start rebellion after once in a while, and it is just incredibly crazy and difficult to control because technological limitations too, and also it's got like a lot of different sort of challenges too. The world was, the borders were very porous. It's really difficult to just gate off everything with a wall, and the Great Wall at the time was ignored because they are just too big.
Okay, interesting.
This became really unfair. He has a golden era, and I have like one of the most hated, worst eras.
To be honest, that helps your argument, but I'm not going to help you out.
Yeah, okay.
Which is the hardest one to rule?
Yeah. All right. So the Qing dynasty comes off with a bang because they spend the first almost 100 years quelling rebellions from Ming loyalists, such as in Formosa, and also the remnants of the Dashi and the Dashuan armies. These were large peasant armies that are what really brought down the Ming, more so than the Manchu, if anything. The Qing only have a prosperity period of, it's not very long because at the turn of like the 1800s. They go into what is called the White Lotus Rebellion, which is like the start of these really large scale rebellions to bring back the Ming Dynasty, and it's just downhill from there. They get hit right at with that. They lose most of their economy, and their silver is paid into quelling rebellions. They get hit by the Opium Wars, then the Taiping Rebellion, the Nian Rebellion, Red Turban Rebellion. There's 100 rebellions during the 19th century, and it's just like breaking this wall until it falls down. So if I'm the emperor of the Qing dynasty, I'm a Manchu, and I'm gonna have my head cut off by multiple groups because everybody hates me. Even my family members want to get rid of me. Empress Dowager Gigi is probably the one actually in charge of the country, while I'm a puppet for most of it. And then at the very end, I'm going to be threatened by revolutionaries who are going to usher in the Republic of China. And I'm going to be betrayed by most of those around me, like Yuan Shukai, who famously overthrew everything.
Nice. 3 seconds to spare. Okay. Counters. CJ, why would it be? Why is Craig basically exaggerating, and it would actually not be that hard to rule the Qing?
Oh, well, yeah. First of all, they have the 8 banners. They have a standing army that can always crush the rebellions. The rebellions are actually a smaller group of people, mostly ragtag rebels. But back in the Tang Dynasty, they have actual army, a standing army of different people. And since the border is porous, they can easily get other tribe members to come in. They make a really deadly army, especially those from the what's it called, the Turkic empires, the Eastern or Western Turkic empires. They use them, the Tang Dynasty used them as mercenaries too, but it means that, since they are more, since the outer regions, the other Jietusi are more closer, culturally closer to the others, they can easily turn them back against the Tang Dynasty itself. They are really rich, which makes them a really enticing piece of meat for everyone to scrounge up for. It's like a carcass for a group of wolves, pretty much. And
Time.
yeah, sure.
Okay. Craig, rebuttal?
The Tang Dynasty is one of the highest points in Chinese history. It's a golden era. There was no golden era for the Qing. They are renowned for being probably the most corrupt of the dynasties. And corruption is actually arguably what brought it down, because corruption is what allowed for everything. Also, there's the issue of climate change. Climate just happened to really hit during the 19th century, and it smashed apart, because usually when these rebellions occur, it's because of famine and problems with harvests. And well, Hong Jitan of the Taiping Rebellion, I mean, he killed 20 to 30 million people. So that rebellion wasn't small by any means. I think it was one of the worst, other than the Three Kingdoms period for China. So I'd have to say, with corruption, these large scale rebellions, and revolutionaries at the cusp of the 20th century, I have the worst job, and I'm probably not in charge. It's Emperor Xixi, so it's like I'm a puppet. It's not fun.
Amazing. Okay. This one's hard to judge. In the main arguments, CJ did a little bit of a better job in putting me in the shoes of the emperor. Craig did a more of an overview, which is interesting, but doesn't fit the question so much. However, then in the counters, Craig was impeccable. While CJ started amazingly with the banners and was talking about his opponent a little bit, and then pulled back and talked mostly about the Tang Dynasty, which increased his main argument, but at the end there was not enough punches landed against his opponent. So I'm giving this to Craig, making it 2-0.
You know what I just realized?
Tell me.
He brought up the 8 he brought up the 8 banners, and the 8 banners were so ineffective and terrible that China introduced the Green Standard Army because they weren't effective, and then other armies had to be introduced because the Green Standards were ineffective. I should have said that.
That only happened later in the period, because at the start of the period, Qing
very good at the beginning.
They pretty much ran over everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I guess it depends. And also, we should remember that the Anusat rebellion pretty much devastated quite a lot of China, and I guess the largest destruction of human life ever in history, perhaps.
Yep. Okay, so next one's going to be broad. What is the biggest misconception about Chinese history? You can pick anything from any period, however you like. You just need to convince me that your pick is a bigger misconception than the other.
Wow.
Okay.
What you going with, CJ?
I would
Cool
say,
history, bro.
okay, cool. Then. I would go with Confucianism is a religion.
Interesting.
Oh, that's a good
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
Mm.
Biggest misconception. Oh, I don't even know if it's my place. I don't know if I should choose this one. I was gonna say that as an ethnicity that they're one group.
Okay.
That there is
Yeah.
a Chinese.
Yeah, I think both of these are pretty valid picks. Okay. Craig, we're back to you, right?
Oh God. I don't. Oh boy, this is not my strongest suit.
I definitely have or still kind of believe in both of these. So great picks. I'm the general audience right now, so educate me.
China has gone through so many different dynasties, and at different times, different ethnic groups controlled it. So you have Mongols and Yuan, Han and Han, Manchu during the Qing, and other groups like Hakka. Hakka can come in. Hong Zhutan of the Taiping Rebellion was famously from the Hakka minority, and there's a rich culture of the Hakka people that had a lot of influence on China, although they're one of the smaller ones. And today, the way that it works in China is they actually use different ethnicity groups to have a point system. So if you're Han Chinese, you're actually kind of you're given less points than other minority groups. So it's interesting that while they are a solidified people as being Chinese now, but they still retain this different ethnicities. You know, you're a Uyghur, you're a Han, you're a Manchu, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it really plays into the vast history and the culture and the flavor because different dynasties had different approaches and they could be brutal to certain ethnic groups and or be very cosmopolitan. There's been points where they've been quite cosmopolitan. I think even during the Qing dynasty, the Manchu had to abide by the fact that the Han were the majority and they tried to do their best to play nice with the Han, even though they were brutal still against them. And I think a lot of people outside of China have no knowledge of this. We tell them, oh, they don't speak, he doesn't speak Mandarin, or they don't speak Cantonese, or the other ethnic languages. It's very diverse. There's hundreds of different groups. And I think a lot of people have no idea. They think it's just Chinese. So I think
Time. Really good. Okay. It would be so cool. I really want to expand on this in the roundtable episode. CJ?
Okay, cool. So I guess, one of the biggest misconception about Confucianism, I think that it is a religion, is because it was brought to the West. The idea was brought to the West by the Jesuit priests. And the Jesuit priests at the time, Matteo Ricci himself, he was in the court. He was actually a practicing Confucian too, a scholar. And he was against the other group of Confucian scholars who are part of the orthodoxy, the Zhuxi's way of thinking, which is called Neo-Confucianism, because it was a label given by the Jesuits against these people. They want to push the idea that Confucianism is the original religion. The Chinese actually are praying to the one God, the Christian God. So the idea of Confucianism was brought to the West with this idea of they're trying to push the idea that the Chinese also believe in the one God. And eventually all the translation from Italian to Latin, they changed a few stuff. And a lot of different people in the West pushing different agendas, like Voltaire. At the time, he was against the church. He was trying to push the idea of a secular state. It is possible to be done as the Chinese did with Confucianism. So they are all adding their own agenda, their own ideas to create Confucianism as their idealized religion. It's almost like how they view Islam as Mohammedans.
Interesting.
It's really interesting for me. I'm writing about the Taiping right now, and it's a big issue with the fight against Confucianism. All right, starting. I have to say, here's an excellent pick. It's a great misconception. if I took myself years ago and I didn't know pretty much anything about China, I would have assumed that Confucianism is just simply a religion and such. But I do think it has such a strong background with philosophy. I think a lot of people in the West understand that it's part philosophy, part religion, if they had to think of it that way. And China, when you think of China, you think of religions. Buddhism also comes into it. So I think generally people I would be led to believe if I had to fight between if people thought there was just one Chinese group or people thought Confucianism is just a religion, I would say that I have the stronger end of it because I think a lot more people would know that Confucianism is not a religion or simply one, and that there's more to it, and that it was just the cultural rules that China abided by for 1,000 years. And when Americans were showing up during the Taiping Rebellion, they seemed to know about it being a philosophy, and they understood that there was different religious beliefs. They understood what Buddhism was and such.
Okay. So CJ, why is it not that big of a misconception that China is basically one people?
Well, the idea is that, the idea of ethnicity and race has been changing through time. So, for example, race used to be considered separated between the Nordic people and the various other within European themselves. Black people wasn't even considered race. It's later that it would come up. They just changed the definition of race and ethnicity through time. For example, the white race is pretty much changes all the time. Even Caucasians, even the Middle Eastern people are considered Caucasian, which is a bit weird, and also North Africans. And the way they change it in Africa, and I mean, the way they change the definition in United States and Europe, and the way they use it politically is quite different. So, as you know, if people come up with the idea of Chinese people, and as long as they have enough cultural influence to unify them, they can become one people. For example, the Manchu themselves, they are actually Jurchens, and they just intermarried between Mongols and the other group of people, even some Han people, and they become the eight liners, and they become Manchu.
Oh, that was your best counter yet. I thought you were going really far and was waiting for when you bring it back to China, and you did, and that was really strong. This may be my personal biases here, but I think that if you go around ask people, more people are actually inclined to tell you that Confucianism is a religion rather than China being one people. They might not even give you 3 groups of Chinese people, but they will, most people have probably heard about the Uyghurs. Most people probably have heard about the problems between Taiwan. And goodbye, this podcast got.
Well, you had to say the T word.
I had to say the T word.
I even said for most of the last time.
Yeah, I think this is a really great topic. I'll just sprinkle in some things I want to discuss in the roundtable, but like the points you brought, Craig, were really great. Like, why do we consider Byzantium one empire when there were so many different dynasties from different parts of the empire all the time? Same with Rome. Rome had emperors from all across the empire, and I would be interesting to evaluate which one is the most unified or has the most cohesion, especially ethnically. As far as this debate goes, hardest one yet because of that amazing counter CJ brought in. Based on the counter and based on the more kind of obscure and underdog answer being with the Confucianism, I have to give it to CJ, making it 2-1. I still not sure what Confucianism exactly is, how it differs from Taoism. I know they're both different from Buddhism, but I'm gonna sit down, or you're gonna explain to me in the roundtable what's exactly the thing with Taoism, Confucianism, and Shinto. Like, these 3 in my head are kind of in the same bubble, and they probably are not at all.
Shinto just gets everything. They get to incorporate any religion they want, and then you just have to believe in the like underlying structure. Shinto is actually really useful.
Really?
It's
love to hear about it. Okay, so we're getting closer to an equalizer. Number 4 will be a little bit more interesting. It's different. If you could restore, as we know, China has an enormous amount of heritage, and a lot of it got destroyed due to natural disasters or communism or rebellions. Now you have the power to bring back a certain relic or monument that was destroyed or damaged in time. Which one do you pick, and why do you think it's more important, more valuable, more interesting, and why do you think your monument or artifact is better to restore if you
Oh,
had that magic wish?
I have a good one.
CJ, actually
Hmm?
give your choices first, and CJ will
All right.
start after.
Oh, okay. My choice is the books burned by Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. The hundred schools of thought, all these thousands of
Oh,
years of history lost in this burning, in his
okay.
attempt to burn all of them.
Great, great. You have to explain. I've never heard of this, so you have to give it a little bit of a clue what that is before saying what the restoration would bring. Craig?
Oh, that's a good one. Mine is similar. It's the old summer palace.
Okay, okay. All right. So restoration time.
Okay.
Oh,
Who's
is it?
Whenever you're ready. Whenever you're ready, CJ.
Oh, okay, me. All right, cool. Yeah, this book, because before China was unified by Qin Shi Huang in the around the 200s BC, there are 100 schools of thought. There are different like ideas, philosophers, all this until it's been reduced to quite a few schools of thought: Confucianism, Mohism. A lot of the books are lost. So there is this thousands of years of not just history but philosophy, knowledges, sciences, math, everything. They have been burned down by Qin Shi Huang. This is a very famous part of history, and all that we have right now in it is mostly things that have been rediscovered or rewritten by scholars, and we have lost all these ideas. One of the bigger ideas is that there are different versions of history, that would give us a different outlook on how the Chinese history started. So it would give us a different sort of I would say an alternate view of history and a bit more complete history, and all this lost information that we can't get anymore. Um, well, it's kind of difficult to emphasize more on this, but if you are part of the culture, you would consider that to be part of the greatest destruction of a few thousand years of
Time.
intellectual development.
Okay, interesting. Just for the record, how did they get destroyed, and why did he destroy them?
Because he wants to unify everything in the
Oh
states.
wow.
He unified measurement, he unified currency, unified everything. He also want
Mm,
to unify the thoughts, and
wow.
he also burned a lot of Confucians. But the idea is that Confucians sometimes is synonymous with scholars. So any intellectual ideas, any intellectual thought were destroyed.
Interesting. Thank you, Craig. Summer Palace.
This is an interesting debate because they're both similar in the scope of a ton of things were destroyed. That was vast amounts of history. So for the summer palace, for those who don't know, it's misleading, the title palace, because it's literally like a few different sized football fields of these extravagant gardens that are holding the tributary gifts of centuries that have been given to it's the wealth that's come from the external world into China from their tributaries. And alongside, similar to his, it's all the literature is stored there that gets burnt down by the British during the Second Opium War. It's such a tragedy that to this day, the current Chinese government kind of has a monument, but aren't really. There's plans to rebuild the old Summer Palace at some point, but it hasn't been finalized, and it's part of their history. It's this horrifying event that's made them as people. Basically, to this day, it's a very sticky issue, but it's overwhelming what was stolen. It was plundered by the French and the British. It held gold, silver, jewels, gifts from around the world that China had accumulated during some of its highest points, because China, especially during the Qing dynasty, was the leading civilization. They had the world's amount of silver. They had received so many different gifts. Countless artifacts were destroyed during this. It was a tragedy. And the only thing I can differentiate is while his is limited to literature, which was, of course, it's the foundation of their society, this had literature and countless gifts as well, and things that were made and things that are gone from this world.
Time. Damn. Follow-up question for you. The British and the French, did they keep some of this stuff? Is it all destroyed? Is it in some museums?
They stole, especially the French. I have to say, a lot of the British get the entire rap for the Opium Wars, but the French were the ones who plundered this place the most.
But
And Queen Victoria received gifts.
can some of these gifts still be found today, seen
Yeah.
today?
Museums.
Museums. Wow. Okay. Another sticky issue. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
CJ, counter time. Why
All
is
right,
the loss
well-
of the Summer Palace not that devastating?
Yeah, it's not that devastating because it is really localized and it's mostly stuff that's owned by the elites. The normal people don't really care that much about it. And with what happens is that with the loss of all this intellectual knowledge from the burning of the post by Qin Shi Huang, is that there are all these possible futures and possible development of China that could have been had, but perhaps alternative history where things could have been better, that's been limited by this one action. They have pretty much closed the idea and just created a tunnel of development of Chinese history, but it could have perhaps developed in a lot of different ways. And the destruction of the Summer Palace, it is not really that big of a deal because as most people in China would know, that object is not worth as much as people's life or people's future. So it's not that big of a deal, to be honest.
Time. Okay.
Some
Craig?
excellent point. In the older world, these things happen quite often. The burning of Alexandria, the
Yeah,
library.
that's right.
If it happened, by the way, there's some stories about that.
Yeah.
The loss of such literature is rampant in the world, whereas I find in the modern age, this was the last vestige that held countless information from previous dynasties like the Ming and such. And it was lost to scholars who at the time could have codified it and brought it to the rest of the world. Whereas in the ancient world, other countries, it couldn't have happened. They couldn't have possibly retained all that information. That information is a lot harder to hold on to. It's a lot easier to lose. And well, it was lost. Whereas in more modern history, this information, countless other scholars from other nations usually come around to other countries and they try to retain it. And this was lost, and it was a tragedy that the British and the French did.
Oh,
Right.
Damn it! This is
I
getting
don't
harder
have
and
the good
harder.
answer. His is
Yeah.
better. Sorry, he picked a much better one. He's right.
Well, so much for my judgment.
No, because when he said like this was the ruling elites hoarding of a bunch of tributary gifts, he's absolutely right.
Yeah,
It's
that's
true.
a solid point. And yeah, coming from a channel that specializes in telling the stories of the not just elites but everyday people too, that was spot on. And yeah, I gotta give it to him. That was a brutal counter. The main was also really solid. That I think, CJ, that was you're getting better and better with each debate,
Okay.
honestly.
All right.
And that's the equalizer. It's 2-2 now. And to see what's going to break the tie, we have something cool, which is the most interesting century for the Far East. The entire Far East, pick a century which has the most amount of great characters, interesting story arcs, events, battles, art, culture.
I mean, I'm gonna fall. It's not because I know it the most, but I really do like the 19th century, especially for Japan. I find it's incredible,
Okay.
the opening period.
I was wondering if you go 19 or 20.
No, I don't want to touch 20. Come on, I don't want it. It's too dark.
Okay, well, right. I would say it would be the Imjin War period, the war between Japan and Korea, with China helping. This
Did
is
you specify
really
the century?
Century, I think it would be about like the 15th century-ish.
Okay.
I forgot.
It's the very end of
Oh,
it.
no,
It's
no, that's-
1592.
no. It's yeah. It's
Do you want to look it up?
It's almost hundreds. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, forgetting the numbers.
Imjin War.
All right. It's the
Yeah,
16th, end of 16th
16th.
century. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
And you get everything.
My
Like you
fault.
get that war and everything in the 16th century in the
Mhm.
entire Far East is yours for the taking.
Mm.
Craig, we're back to you, right?
Yeah, are we talking about Asia in general, or I have to pick a country?
Oh, Far East, the whole
Far East?
region.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, that's okay. So 19th century is when, well, Southeast Asia, China, and Japan are opened up to the world, some more brutally than others. China, I think, got it the roughest, although Vietnam too, it was pretty rough with the French did. But it's also, as much as it's a dark and sad story, and colonialism is present, it's also very inspiring. How a nation like Japan, especially, they tackled this, I would say, in a fashion that's no other nation has. They modernized in the shortest period possible. To fight being colonized, they simply emulated and became a powerhouse like the Western powers to make it look as if they were like one of them. And they employed the very best of the outside world while retaining a lot of their traditions and culture at the same time. And as terrible as it was for China, the breaking of China built the China today. This horrifying experience, beginning of the century of humiliation, it's a core to what it is to be Chinese today. They were slighted and they're overcoming it, and as a people, they have overcome it, and they're one of the strongest nations we see today. For Southeast Asia, they underwent turbulence, but there was also opportunity. When the Westerners showed up, some new trade networks were opened, and I would say it was just exciting because it was East meets West.
Time. Perfect.
Oh.
Okay. You sold me.
Mhm.
You sold me on that century.
All right.
It's also kind of depressing and dark, but
Okay.
yeah.
Yep. Interesting
Yeah.
choice.
CJ.
Okay. Cool. All right. During that period, it's a very interesting period. It's not just. It's actually not just war between Japan, Korea, and China. We also need to remember that at the time, the Spanish were also colonizing the Philippines. They could have been the fourth power that's helping. Actually, they did offer to help Japan to invade China, and things could have been a lot more rough at the time. So it's the things are the war was relatively isolated, but the thing is, what would have been? I'm trying to sell you on all the possible futures, because if Japan actually indeed conquered China, then the world would have been a lot more different. And at the time itself, there is also a lot of they had all this different idea, what China is like, what Korea is like. It's a massive culture shock for all this different group of people to come together and fight, and they don't know anything about each other, and the war is actually a mess. And if you look at the what's it called, the diplomatic relations, there is a lot of like mistranslations. People who are trying to stop the wars are just making the translation out into that says something completely different. So the war stopped because of a certain like diplomatic letter, but later on it started because they figured out it's a lie, and there is just a lot of like misinformation and a lot of people going crazy over all these mistranslations.
That was nice. Okay, rebuttals time.
I'll just point out, I really like the Imjin Wars. It's one of my favorite. There's a duality between our two periods. The Imjin Wars and the war over the Joseon dynasty, what ushers in the Qing dynasty, because the invasions allowed the Jurchen people to attack and become a strong people, which overthrows the Ming. It's shown in the 19th century again with the First Sino-Japanese War. Again, the question of Korea and Japan overthrowing Big Brother, which was China. So in his period, Big Brother has been solidified for most of history. China is this ancient civilization and Japan is the small one. But in the 19th century, there's this enormous change where Japan becomes more powerful, and now Japan is dictating things and attacking China, and it completely overthrows, like, in the grand scheme of things, it changes the world, and it really changes the perception of the world. and it's well, it's horrifying in its own, but it's also exciting that such change is occurring, and there's a lot of opportunities that are won, and some are opportunities that are missed. I'd say the Chinese, they lost a lot of opportunities to modernize quicker.
Time. Okay. Okay,
All right.
CJ.
Okay.
Why is the 19th
Cool.
century not that great of a story?
Well, 19th century, because in general scheme of things, there are plenty of wars all around the world. It's not just East Asia that is facing this sort of like conflict, and this is just a microcosm within a lot of different changes in different in other regions, to be honest. And it is, I would say, it's almost like a natural progression of events, with colonialism and the end of it and the incoming world wars. So I would say it's more of the same.
You got 20 seconds if you want them.
20 seconds. All right. Cool. I don't know. Yeah, it's really and I would add that it's the thing is, if we want to consider something to be more important when there is the Western side of things that's part of the participants, a lot of people forget that during the Imjin War, the West was also there. The Spanish were there, and the Portuguese and the Dutch were also there. They were already there during the Sengoku period. So
Time.
it would have been a lot more messy, and that's what I'm trying to sell the possibilities, to be honest.
Yeah. All right.
Small expeditionary force from Japan that never had a chance against China.
Okay, so it's always tricky when one of the choices is so, there's such a gap in the centuries, and you can always say, this led to that. It's tricky. Both of you really sold me on the atmosphere and on the interesting sides, and I think CJ leaned a little bit more on the alternative routes that you can take, and to understand the period and the region, you really need to check out the Imjin War. While Craig gave me more of a connection to the modern day. Both are really good. Based on the just more variety that Craig presented, I'm gonna give it to him because he managed to squeeze in more than just one chapter, one conflict. He squeezed in several different regions together, and I think that really helped his argument. I think chapter per chapter, CJ gets this, but overall, Craig answered the question a little bit better, making it 3-2. We have 2 questions left, and for the next one, I'm going to need you guys first to pick China or Japan.
I'll try Japan. Why not?
Okay. The question is, which one has this is very tricky, but superior, better, or however you want to phrase it, art? Which of the two is
all right? Cool.
Has better art? We don't want to be just talking about wars and depressive stuff. So let's see. I think both have really interesting art that a lot of people might confuse with each other, but enjoy as well. It's extremely distinctive. But which one's better? And on what criteria would you say it's better?
Yeah,
I like Japan
well, this
for
is
this
all
one.
about just winning. Just about winning argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I think all art is really subjective, but okay. Who wants to start first?
It's you. So you can just go.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, well, I would say that the interesting thing about Japan is that not just Japan is a very powerful country in absorbing other people's culture and history. It's a island country that's pretty much open to new ideas. And the thing is, if you want to say China's art is great, the thing is, Japan also imports Chinese art into it. So whatever's been created in China, it would also be accepted in Japan. And Japan also absorbs like British literature during the 19th century and so on. They got absorbed British literature, and even right now, today, they are absorbing European. Even if you like manga or stuff like that, they are absorbing European ones. They tell stories about Iran's literature that becomes part of their history. So they also take Arabian. There is also an Arabian superhero in Japan's tokusatsu series. They got all the different things. They are so great at absorbing a lot of different arts. I think China can do a bit more of that nowadays, to absorb ideas from another place so that it can also add to their own arts. The idea is that not Japan's art is great not just because it is Japan's indigenously created art. It's because they can make other people's art become part of their art scenery, art industry, pretty much.
Great argument. I think this is valid for the entire debate, but Craig, you're gonna have your hands full with so many images and maps throwing them on screen. It would be lovely to see the different examples between you two. But now you have a completely different job, and that's following that great main.
Repeat the question again.
Which of the two has the better art? Convince me that if I want to study one of the two art schools, I'm better off studying the Chinese one.
I'm just going to say it here. I am not an art historian, but I actually know Japanese art quite well. So sadly, I wish I had got the one. What I'll say about China is China was the one that introduced what we would call the great pottery. So what we call, the ancient Greek techniques actually came from China. So China is one of the fundamental ones that started everything. And like he had pointed out, everything that Japan does is just stolen from China. But China is much more isolated than Japan. While Japan looks outside, he's absolutely right on that. They take the very best of the world and they employ it into their own traditions. China's kind of the opposite. They retain and retain and retain, and they always go back to the classics. They always look previous. Well, until recently, modern history, and now it's kind of the opposite. But they romanticize the periods of their history and they gloss over it. The three the Three Kingdoms period, you can find it in everything. Any video game you play, you're gonna have all these characters that have these renowned histories, and there's an atmosphere that comes from this ancient world that's always infused into everything. You watch Asian films from any films from China, let's say Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, it always is reminiscent of these older times, almost like a flavor of magic and otherworldly things. There's an art in the martial arts in China that I think is superior to that than of Japan, which I know people probably kill me for saying that, but I'm sorry to say, martial arts, if you were going to pick the two, I think China is fundamentally the one that really started and had more grounded. Other than that, Japan has manga, of course, and has a lot of woodblock carvings, which were excellent.
Damn. I was such a noob. I was like, is martial art an art? Oh, it's in the name.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Wow. CJ, good luck, bro.
Right. Okay. Well, the idea is that China itself, if you actually pay close attention, a lot of the influences also come from Buddhism, which is from India and also Central Asia. It's what makes it great is because it also absorbs other things. And if you read the Song Dynasty writings by a lot of the officials, they even at the time they say that a lot of these people, they are wearing Hu clothing, which means the barbarian or the Northerners, the nomadic clothing. Through time, they are actually absorbing a lot of what's it called, influences from all the other countries. It's just that a lot of people who are not very familiar with the history can't see the differences between all the different evolution, different changes. And right now, the thing is, China has stopped in absorbing as much as it used to during the heyday of the Tang Dynasty and the other dynasty and the Yuan dynasties, the Mongol dynasties. Right now, Japan is absorbing all these different arts from around the world and making it their own. Right.
This is such a wholesome debate. I love it. Craig?
I'm going to narrow it down. Something that is exemplified by both countries is poetry. And Japan very much copied China and played within that realm. And they had, in the 19th century, they would have diplomats do poetry together, like Li Hongzhang famously did it with Ito Hirobumi. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things as far as the cultures are concerned, and something that they had a brotherly bond with. And I don't think one or the other is better, but they're just unique and different. Whereas Japan was highly emphasized. They literally learned from the Western world and they employed it into their poetry a bit, whereas China tried to retain things from the past more so. And I just think the retaining the ancient part of their culture, they did more than Japan did. I mean, both did, of course, but I think China did so more so, and I think it's pretty beautiful to just retain something that will be lost if not. Because change changes things.
Okay. Man,
Hard one.
why did I choose this question knowing that I have to judge it afterwards? This is the most impossible thing to judge, like classics versus I don't know.
Didn't even talk about calligraphy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been a big one too.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just such a broad subject.
I honestly,
Yeah.
I'm gonna need some help. Craig, how do you think this went?
I think both of us did really well. I think
Yeah.
understand what you're saying really makes sense. There is also value in keeping some of the old traditions alive, and I think need to be combined both with the new and the old. So
I'm biased. Japan, I think is more.
We're gonna leave rating out of this one for now, at least. We'll see how the next one goes and see how difficult it gets from there. So the result still stays 3-2 for Craig. And the final debate I got for you guys is again going to require you to pick China or Japan. You can switch.
Guess we switch.
You can stay.
Yeah, let's switch.
However you prefer.
Yeah,
Are you
switch.
sure?
Why not?
So CJ, you're going China and Craig is Japan. Okay, the question is, I hope you enjoy this one. Overall, we're not looking at the countries today or a specific moment. Overall, I want you to answer this. Which state was more imperialistic? We're talking about two states that at different points in time that were incredibly imperialistic, both of them. And that's it's interesting how each of us defines imperialism, but I think this is going to be a nice finale. Greg, we're back to you. So whenever you're ready, bring it on.
Oh boy, the Empire of Japan. Great. So the Meiji Restoration occurs, and they're going back to the old to revere the emperor yet again. And Emperor Meiji is put on the throne. Japan has not been a world player in a long time, but they venture out and they start doing what empires do best to say that they're an empire. They start colonizing. They attack Formosa, Taiwan, they take Taiwan. They take the Joseon dynasty and they annex Korea. And then they want to take the rest of Southeast Asia and most importantly, China. China is everything to the Japanese at this point. And to be an empire, it's one thing to control your nation as it is, and that's a difficult thing. You have rebellions, dissatisfaction, economic troubles, foreign invaders. But the Empire of Japan, which formulated in a very short window of time and had to modernize in a short window of time, shocked the world, especially when it came to opening up the Second Sino-Japanese War. The Japanese were mocked. The Americans would say they just copy us. They don't actually have the ability to make technology in that. But the Japanese brought several nations to their knees. It was a stupid choice on their part, and it ruined them. But I'd say they were one of the most terrifying empires that ever existed. They were horrifying in a lot of ways and bastardized, especially what they did with Bushido. They ruined it. But I think they're the definition of a tyrannical empire, and that is an empire.
All right, getting some Star Wars vibes here.
Well, Darth Vader is, from
CJ.
Well, okay. All right, cool. Empire. Well, I guess that empire, in my definition, I guess is a centralization of power. Doesn't necessarily need to be good or evil. It's just that it needs to control everything. With China being the center of the world, it needs to be in the center as pretty much really just to keep itself safe. What happens is that all the since Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, unified all the different states, they always need to have a centralized bureaucracy, and all the different states need to be part of its become its province. So it needs to reduce all threats sometimes when people think of imperialism, they imagine it from one country against another, a different culture, one culture to another. But they are doing it to people surrounding themselves. All these different states in China, they had their own differences, their own regional differences. So for like thousands of years, it is considered to be, it has, to most Chinese, it has become the normal state of affair to have one centralized bureaucracy that is considered as normal. So when empire is considered as a status quo, I think that would make them the ultimate imperial state.
10 seconds.
Right. And besides, Japan actually didn't become, even during the Sengoku period, the northern Japan wasn't part of Japan. So they weren't doing all the good job at being an empire anyway.
Okay. Craig?
Yeah, there's a reason why I chose the Meiji Empire, because it's true. Japan never solidified. They didn't have Okinawa. They didn't have the North. But the Empire of Japan, Tenno Henkai Banzai, people killed themselves for their emperor. China, Qing and the Ming, corruption broke them. Their own people allowed it to fall. The Empire of Japan was so terrible and so brainwashing, especially with the cult around Emperor Hirohito, that it brought people who weren't even really Japanese. So the Okinawans weren't really considered that full Japanese, and other groups to kill themselves for that said emperor. China didn't have kamikazes, although they had suicide divisions in World War II. I think the power of the cult of the emperor in Japan is something that the world had never seen. It was the most extreme version of an empire.
Right.
10 seconds.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, the idea of Chinese as an
wait,
empire.
Wait. Craig.
Oh, you said 10 seconds to me?
Yes.
Sorry. I would just say China has multiple empires where Japan only really had one good one. And the one good one they had was certainly an eye-opener.
Okay. CJ, why is Japan less of an empire?
It's less of an empire because the idea is that the emperor itself wasn't really in power for most of the time. They are controlled by the shogun, and there are so many different like smaller daimyos or sometimes controlling the shogun themselves. So it's like a matryoshka doll of power. And they did not actually control northern Japan until really late during the Japanese periods, and also during the time of Nobunaga. The idea of empire is really just around the Kyoto region, and when he wants to go to the capital, it means that he's because at the time he was also considered as a country bumpkin, not quite Japanese, not quite part of the empire. So him showing up the emperor, it's really big. It's a really big deal at the time, and Japan as an empire only happened. As known to the West, it's only happened relatively late, and for most of the period, they sent tributaries to China too.
Oh,
wow!
The tributary system, that's a good one, actually.
That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Okay, so this makes it very interesting because I think it's fair to say that CJ took this one, mainly because there was a little reversal of roles here. Craig mostly spent his counter buffing up the Japanese empire and not really saying why China wasn't that imperialistic. I definitely want to unpack this one in the roundtable as well. But the score is 3-3. It's not rigged. The art thing, I'm not going to touch it. I'm actually going to let the viewers decide who won this. In your opinion, it's not rigged, and I promise you there will be future duels where someone will win or lose. But I really got to give props to CJ because we've been doing these debates for a while and we have a lot of experience. You come in here and you really held your ground so well against Craig, which I think you agree with me that he's incredibly competent.
Right, but Craig's been more than fair. He's been like helping a lot of my points all throughout the way. So I really give half the credit to Craig, to be honest.
But this was really, really good. That's gonna be it for the debate episode. We're not gonna record a roundtable one, but before that, CJ, do you want to plug anything? Talk about your channel a little bit and tell people why they should check it out.
Right, yeah. So currently I am doing a summarized retelling of the Chinese classic Water Margin. You will learn a lot about like Chinese culture and all the history behind it. Yeah. They also discuss about like cannibalism, how it was viewed in Song Dynasty and like in previous Chinese dynasties, and also concubinage, how to get concubines and how you manage them, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, which yeah, I know some people would ask questions.
Sounds like a good time. Concubines and
Yeah.
cannibalism. That
Yeah, there you
should be the
go.
name of the series.
Yes.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
being on here. Craig, you want to wrap this up or say something in as epilogue?
I I have learned a lot. Excuse me, it's early in the morning
Me
for me.
too.
I just have to say it's really interesting because we have me who's just almost exclusively modern history for these two nations we were talking about, and he is more so with the ancient and the medieval period. So I thought it was a good
Yeah,
blend. Really, this is very
definitely.
exciting. And this has been Questioning History. Till next time.